Welcome, everybody. This is, I will say, one of my favorite topics, or has begun one of my favorite topics, is regarding using ChatGPT and really finding different ways to integrate it into what we do. And as a leadership coach, as a performance coach, this to me has been a great tool. And what I want to talk about today is I've done a number of these, right? One's on sales and on having better communications and just on how to leverage it. This one specifically is going to be around communication and productive conflict. And the reason I decided to do this one now is I've just started a new project where I'm working with probably ended up being about 200 managers, and we're working through a project right now of productive conflict, and it's based on sort of three different modules we're doing. And the first one is people are getting personality assessments based on DISC for productive conflict. So specifically, how do people show up in conflict as it relates to personality? The next piece is around emotional intelligence. How do you develop self-awareness, awareness of others? And then lastly, we're going to talk about strategy. And one of the models we're going to talk about in here is the Thomas Kilmann model around effective conflict. What are some of the strategies? So it starts out with understanding personality, goes into emotional intelligence, and then goes into actual strategies. And to me, chat is a perfect tool to be able to help people refine in each one of those areas. So it's almost like we do the workshop, and then I will suggest to them, like, here's an opportunity to use this tool and to have it help you to become better at each of those areas. So we'll talk about a few today. I'm going to start out as I always do, talking about really just some of the basics around EI. So I'm going to switch up my screen a little bit here. So first off, again, I'm Patrick Varano. I run a company called Emory Leadership Group. I have a book that was published back in June of 2022 called The Leadership Bridge: How to Engage Employees and Drive Organizational Excellence. And I also have a podcast that I've run since about 2018 called Learning from Leaders. Because leaders are learners. And if you're here, I believe that that's where you are. You're a learner. And I think in this environment, we need to continue to be learners. Anybody that's looking to elevate where they are is always looking for, how do I do that? So with that said, what I've also done is created 3 newsletters that I've started writing. And each one of these is unique. One deals with the complete leader, the first one. The next one deals with what great teams do. And the last one is called Rise Above Your Best, which is all about personal development. And those are the 3 areas that I focus on. But what I've done with each of these newsletters is I'm taking just one study that's been done, and I'm outlining the results of the study, the outcomes of the study, but writing the article in a way that it applies with the real world. How do we use this? How does what was found in this study actually apply to what we're doing? So if you have an opportunity, it would be great if you would subscribe to any of those, or all of them would be even better. So what are we going to do today? We're going to cover some of the basics on chat. We'll talk about emails and the misunderstanding that might come from emails, why chat can be, I think, really helpful in terms of maybe a check on what we send out or what we respond to. Then we're going to talk about emotional intelligence and conflict and sort of how to utilize those. And last, I'm going to talk about or give an example on how to use ChatGPT as a coach. How can we do that? So a number of different AI platforms. I've listed 4 of them up here. The only 2 that I really use at this point are Chat and I use Claude. I have subscriptions to both, and I use them for different reasons. Claude, for me, especially for larger documents, I mean, Claude can take a PDF that's 100 pages long and still work with that, whereas ChatGPT just doesn't have that ability in terms of taking in that much data. So for me, as an example, I took my book, which is about 137 pages. I downloaded it or uploaded it into Claude and asked it to give me an executive summary on it, which it did, which I then sort of utilized with many of my clients to help them get an 8-page summary of the book that I've written. So here's another thing. What is ChatGPT? Oftentimes the resistance to it is people feel like, oh, it's cheating. I don't want to use it for this. And I would argue it's only cheating if you intend to use it for cheating. This is not about cheating. And this is an example that I have used in the past, which seems to resonate. Back in high school, I was doing construction, working for my brother-in-law and his company, framing houses. And at that time, the pneumatic guns started coming out. And I remember there were other framers that were like, oh, we're not using pneumatic guns. That's cheating. We're only using a hammer. And, this is old school. You would be hard pressed to find any development that you go into where they're building houses that pneumatic guns are not being used. And to me, the reason for that is we know that they increase the ability of us to be able to do things faster. Now, with that said, I think just like ChatGPT, it does that as well, but you still need to know what you're doing. And it's the same thing with building houses, right? Just because I had a pneumatic gun, I still needed to know how to frame a house. It wasn't going to do that for me. And it's the same thing with ChatGPT. And I'll speak to that in a moment in regards to this idea of hallucination, that if I don't know what I'm doing, the information that I get back, how am I going to check if it's right or wrong? Right? I don't know quantum physics. If I ask it to write an article on quantum physics, it will do that. But if somebody were to read that and ask me any questions on it, I wouldn't be able to answer them unless I went back to chat and said, let me plug this in first. So there are so many different plugins that are coming now. So I just want to leave this. This is a screenshot. For me, when I use ChatGPT, on the left of this, there's an opportunity to look at what are some of the plugins. So DALL-E, it can be used in the area of generating images, things like that. There's writing. I mean, it's endless. There's negotiation ones that again help us to become more specific in terms of how we want to use ChatGPT or other GPTs. So the next thing that I want to just touch on is that I look at ChatGPT as a genie, in that it will only provide for me what I ask it for effectively. And that's why the generative prompt is so important. The questions that you ask, this is all about how you become more effective at this. The better you are at asking questions, the better the information you're going to get from ChatGPT or any of them, right? And that only comes with practice and taking classes and doing workshops and any of those. So I'm continually sort of looking for other free workshops. I've also paid for a number of them. I went through Vanderbilt had one that I certified in that. I also did one through UPenn, through Wharton School. That was a more extensive one that I got certified through that, and constantly just trying to refine how do I get better at this, and we can continually do that. So I mentioned this idea of hallucination. Well, we know this is one of the things that can happen with any of the GPTs, is that we will plug stuff in, and I recall this especially from the first version of chat that I used, which was a 3.5. I was asking it to provide some research, some citations in regards to the model that I used. And what I was finding was that it would give citations, but when I went to look up those citations so that I could read the actual study that was done, they didn't exist. They didn't exist. So I would type in, the citation you sent to me doesn't exist. Can you basically reformulate it? Give me a real one. And it would say, my apologies. Here is the actual citation to that. And I would go and look for that one, and that one didn't exist. So that is part of the hallucination, that it will sort of go off tangents at times. And again, back to the point of where you need to know what you're asking it to do on at least some level, so that you can look and say, this doesn't seem right. And again, always check your work. Always go back and look at your sources and find other ways to investigate if those sources are accurate. And we would do that anyway. Anything that we get, I would hope that that's what we're doing, is we're checking our resources or our citations. So the generative prompts we're going to talk about. I'm going to talk about the power is in the question first. I'm going to give you one suggestion that you can use, I think, just to help you sort of learn how to generate better questions. And then two that we'll talk about in this. One is going to be the persona, and the other is the interview prompt. So first, this idea of refining your question. This is a prompt that you can use with ChatGPT to make sure, or to help you refine even how you ask questions. So to me, it's like asking the genie to rate your question that you've asked it. So after I ask my question, suggest a better version of the question and ask if I want to use that one instead. So what this is allowing me to do is say, here's what I want to ask. And again, the genie is saying, You can ask it that way, but if you really want maybe better information to come back to you, then maybe you want to ask it this way. Which do you want to do? You want to stick with yours, or do you want to use the way that I've suggested? It's not always going to vary, but again, it's just an opportunity for me to sort of get an idea on, am I asking good questions? And that's a way to start refining them. So the next is what we call a persona prompt. And this is where all I'm doing is I'm asking it to act as whatever that person is. So, and generally an expert in that area. So act as a physician, act as a mentor in this case, act as an expert in marketing, copywriting, act as a professional who is trained in. So give you an example, I used a couple days ago with one of my other groups, we were talking about a model called the 4 disciplines of execution. So I could say, act as an expert that's trained in the 4DX model and provide me some suggestions on how I've put this together, if this fits regarding sort of lead indicators. Are these good lead indicators? And it will help me to sort of get an idea on, am I on the right track? So the last one I've listed here is this act as this type of DISC personality. So there are 4 different personalities in regards to DISC. And if I were to do a prompt and say, ask me about the DISC performance profile, it will give me an outline of that, which I know DISC. Generally, anybody that's trained in that knows what those are. So I can use that then to say, act as this person, tell me how I should respond to you based on your personality style. And that's one thing that, again, is as we're going through this area of conflict, I can use it for that. So the interview persona, this really combines the persona one, or that prompt, act as an expert persona, with the interview. So it says, act as an expert in conflict resolution. You've been trained in all models and disciplines of conflict resolution and have been hired to help resolve a conflict between me and my employee. So I've sort of set the stage for this person. I'm saying you're basically somebody that is an expert in the space, and I've hired you to help me deal with an employee issue that I'm having. Interview me on my current conflict to provide recommendations on how I can resolve this problem. Ask me as many questions, or you could say, or ask me only 10 questions to create an outline for me to follow. And then what is important here is that you have to say, ask one question at a time and let me respond before asking the next question. Because if you don't, and this, I found this out when I did it, if I don't ask me one question at a time and then give me the opportunity to answer, it will list 10 questions or the number of questions that I should be answering of it. Now, again, I can use this, and we'll talk about it in a minute, in many different ways. But this, to me, if you have more time, the interview persona really can be valuable, because it's almost like having a conversation with somebody that I have asked them to be an expert in this area. So for emails, right, this is one of those areas I think we become challenged with. So I can use this to draft initial messages, right? Start by writing a rough draft, and then I can ask ChatGPT, I can say, here's what I've written. I want to make sure that this has a positive tone to it. Or I want to make sure that this has clarity to it. Can you review this and make suggestions based on that? For specific requests, right? Can you help me rewrite this feedback to sound more positive? For more clarity, can you add more detail to this instruction to make it clearer in terms of who needs to do what by when? So those are a few different ways, right? So regular use, what I can do is I can simply sort of use this as an opportunity to make sure that what I'm putting out there is clear, and I can set the parameters of what I'm trying to do. So the last one here is around responding to emails, right? Maybe I'm going to send off a response, but before I do that, I'm going to ask it, here's what was sent to me. Here's what my response is going to be. Can you evaluate how, any challenges that you might see in this? And I'll give you an example of, I was working with an individual, and this was several months ago, and they send me an email that they were going to send off to their team. And they said, can you just review this? I want to send this off to my team because we're going to be implementing this new procedure. I want people to follow this new policy. But obviously this person, in reading it, was thinking like, I want to make sure this comes off in the right way. So we were working on some things around social needs, around autonomy, and people feeling as if they have status and fairness. And what I asked him to do was actually take that, and based on the model that we were using around social needs, is ask it to evaluate the email that you were sending based on how people might respond to it based on those social needs, how it might impact them. And it did that. And what it gave him the opportunity to do was to ask it to suggest how he could rewrite this in a way that didn't violate any of those sort of areas, but in his style. So that was the benefit for him. Now, I could use it from the standpoint of when we're talking about personalities, right? There are 4 different personalities, one of them being this dominant style of personality that is very sort of fast-paced and outspoken. They're to the point, but also they can be questioning and skeptical in terms of what's put out there. So I could ask it to write the email based on that style. So a couple ways that as examples, right? So the first one here is before chat, right? Your report needs more detail in sections 2 and 3. So when I look at that, I might think, well, that's kind of vague, right? What can happen? So what I do is, ask chat. Now I've highlighted this or I put in red, will you? That goes to some research that was done by Robert Cialdini, and I do a lot of training in that space around persuasion and influence. And this will you, as opposed to saying just please add a bit more detail or even could you, will you provides an opportunity where people, even if it's in an email, it's voluntary for them. You're asking them to do something. And when we know that when people feel as though that they have some say in it, when it's voluntary, that the likelihood that they'll follow through on it is greater. So not to get down a rabbit hole, but there's science behind the power that will you has, as opposed to saying, please contact me. So clarifying ambiguity, again, please handle the client request as soon as possible. Could be vague. So this is an opportunity for me to, knowing the situation, how can I write this better? What should I have involved here? So as I mentioned, disc personalities, right? This is where I'm telling it, I know the personality, right? I'm giving it sort of the background of who this person is based on their personality styles. And we went through this again the other day with this group of leaders in regards to their personality styles. And then how do you work with other personality styles in regards to DISC? So I could cut and paste that, this is dealing with a dominant personality style. How would it be best for me to structure this email, sending it to them? Or somebody that is a steadiness personality style. I want to send an email. What would be the best way based on what the draft is here? How should I write this in a way that would be best received by somebody that has a steadiness personality style? So again, provides me another set of eyes to sort of look at this to say, here's what I want to do. Can you look at this based on the understanding this background or being an expert in this area, and make suggestions on how I do this better? So here's another way that I can use this, where if I'm talking about conflict, and here's what I did on this is I gave you some screenshots. I said, based on current research, what are 3 of the most effective conflict resolution models that are used in a workplace setting? So what chat then does is it sort of goes out there, and again, with the paid version of this, I'm asking it to basically scrape the internet as well. So what this does is it comes up with 3 different models. I will say, I think I mentioned Thomas Kilmann is one that I enjoy using with clients. So that just happened to come up first on this. But it tells me, here are the models, right? Each of them. And what I did next was I said, well, can you provide more detail on how I could use number 1? So then what it does is it starts going through and actually getting more detailed about actually the steps that are involved in using the Thomas Kilmann model. Now, if we go back to that interview as an expert, I could also do it here where I could say, act as an expert in this area. These are 3 models that I want to use. Which one would be best in this situation? So you can see it goes down further, and then it starts to say, well, here's how you would implement the TKI model effectively. Here's what you do. Assess my default conflict style, right? So it says, take the assessment. I could ask it, can you give me suggestions on how I could assess my conflict style? And that's a model that's out there. So you'd be able to get a pretty good understanding of what your style is, and then analyze the situation, choose the appropriate mode, right? For each of those, I could ask it to provide more information. I could say, could you be more detailed and give an example of number 3, choosing the appropriate mode, and how I'd do that? And it will do that. Right. So the conversation goes next to the interview that I mentioned. Right. So I showed you the example in the beginning of this: act as an expert in conflict resolution, trained in all models and disciplines. And now what it does is it says, okay, I'm ready to assist you. To begin, can you describe the nature of the conflict? Now, I just sort of was making things up as I was going, but if you have a real situation, right, here's a conversation that we're having back and forth, right? So I say this employee seems to be more challenging in meetings regarding a new project that we're starting. Okay, I understand. Can you, basically, what's been going on, right? So I say outbursts when suggestions are made, blah, 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 right? Then it says anything has changed. Well, not that I'm aware of. It was my response to that. And then there was a glitch here, so I had to reprompt it, right? And then it says, thank you for providing the context. This individual is not the lead for this change. So I'm sort of giving it, again, some more data in regards to what's going on. And we're just having this conversation as it goes all the way down, right? And then it says having a one-on-one could be a constructive first step for this. Would you be open to doing that? So as I say yes, what it then provides is, okay, here's a framework that you might want to think about for having that initial conversation, right? So set up a positive tone, seek their perspective, listen. And again, for each one of these, what I could do is I could ask for more details. And if you notice at the very end here, what does it do? It says, would you like guidance on how to phrase questions or statements during the conversation to maintain a constructive or positive dialogue? It's helping me to be able to make sure that what I'm going to provide or put out there is going to be effective. And again, that to me is the power of this. So I can just continue to drill down on this, and I could say, can you give me some examples on things that I could do to set a positive tone based on this situation? Can you give me some ideas on questions that I could ask that would be effective in terms of seeking their perspective? Can you give me recommendations on active listening? What are some things that I can do and examples that will help me to make sure that I'm doing that? And or maybe based on their personality style, how can I, with the understanding of their personality style, effectively address the issue directly? What are some things I have to do? Because a dominant personality style versus a steadiness personality style, they're going to receive that address differently. So again, it's helping me understand, like, here are some suggestions. Are they going to be perfect? No, but oftentimes people are at the beginning are just like, I just don't know where to start. That's my biggest problem is starting this. And I think that's where ChatGPT provides so much value, because it provides an opportunity to almost brainstorm with somebody that I'm not worried about what they think about me, or if they're going to think I don't know what I'm talking about, or I shouldn't be asking these questions. This is almost like a safe space for me to practice with things. And I could use this as one of those tools where I could say, here's the situation. What would you do? Act as an expert in conflict management, act as an expert, an expert HR director, whatever that thing is. I could say, can you provide me suggestions on how to do that? And then from there, I could drill down on those, or I could say, well, what would I do if the person responds this way? What would be a good recommendation if the person basically tells me to go to hell or something else? How could I respond to that without, ruining the rest of the interaction that we have together, or keeping it productive? How would I do that? And it will provide you opportunities to be able to do that. So again, what have we talked about, right? Using ChatGPT is a useful tool to improve communication and resolve conflict. And we talked about how you do it through acting as an expert, or how we use it to reshape our emails, or how to use it as an interview prompt where I'm asking it to be that expert in a certain area. And it could be any model that you have or book that you've read. You could, on some level put it in there and say, act as an expert in, in somebody who has read and trained in the book Getting to Yes by Roger Fisher and William Ury, which is one of the famous books in regards to conflict management. I could ask it to do that and have a conversation around that. And to me, that is where it becomes such a powerful tool in regards to helping us to train better. So lastly, it's not cheating unless you're using it to cheat. And it's all about the prompt, the questions. This is your genie. That the better you are at asking the questions, the better the genie is going to be in terms of giving you what you need. And lastly, the more you use it, the better you're going to become at it. I mean, it's as simple as that. It's like any other tool. So I hope you found this valuable. Again, there'll be more in these series of how to use ChatGPT and other tools as well in terms of becoming more effective, whether it's personally on your team or